Hello everyone, it's Mimi here. BMS working in the NHS. And today's video will be about the second module of the Section 2 in the IBMS digital registration portfolio called Health and Safety and Wellbeing. So, just a quick introduction to this video. It will be short and sweet, I promise. It will be focused on the learning outcomes, different types of evidence, and HCPC SOPs that need to be met in this module. We will discuss evidence justification and IBMS evidence suggestions. I will share with you some of my evidence ideas, and we will finish with some helpful tips to make your portfolio really good. With all that said, I hope you will enjoy the content of my video and I hope you will learn a lot. So let's dive into the second module of the second section. These are the learning outcomes you should be able to meet when you have completed this module. You should be able to identify hazards and mitigate risks by complying with local operational procedures, policies, and relevant health and safety legislation. Establish safe environments for practice and apply principles of good laboratory practice to maintain the safety of yourself and others. Recognize the potential impact of your own mental and physical health on your ability to practice safely and effectively, including how to seek help and support when necessary. When you complete this module, come back to the learning outcomes to see and check that you have actually met them. This is the mandatory piece of evidence. The task is, produce an example risk assessment that demonstrates how you work in accordance with health and safety legislation, including appropriate use of PPE, hazard controls, and risk management strategies. So to break it down, first part is asking you to produce an example risk assessment. Find out what risk assessment is. Then, speak to the health and safety officer in your department if they need help with risk assessments, and you could either perform one under supervision or review one. The next part of the task is asking you to demonstrate how you work in accordance with health and safety legislations. First, find health and safety legislations are in place for your laboratory and then demonstrate how you follow them. Consider COSHH and handling hazardous substances, RIDDOR and reporting injuries and diseases, HNS at work regulations and injury prevention, or good laboratory practice regulations. Also consider regulatory bodies like UKAS, Health and Safety Executive. The last part of the task is asking you to include the use of PPE, hazard controls, and risk management strategies. Consider different types of hazard controls in your workplace such as ventilation, properly maintained equipment, waste management, spill response, SOPs, housekeeping, and different types of PPE like goggles, gloves, lab coat, and so on. Consider risk management strategies like risk identification, risk analysis, risk prioritization, risk control and mitigation, and review. Also include QMS or quality management system, register, process mapping, or workforce awareness. IBMS also offers their advice on how to approach this mandatory evidence, which I think is very good. First information you are getting is telling you that evidence should be from your routine practice. What is it that you do day in and day out that requires risk assessment to be in place? The next part of the advice is asking you to explain how you apply principles of health and safety to your practice. Think about the principles, such as prevention, risk mitigation, accountability, hazard identification and control, monitoring, training, competence, and so on. How do you apply those in your practice? The next part of the advice is asking you how do you ensure safety for yourself as in your laboratory. This links closely to the previous part. So how do you apply the HNS principles in your practice to ensure safety all around you? The next part of the advice is specifically asking you to analyze potential risks. Think about your approach: evidence-based, risk-led, identification of hazards, assessment of risks, scoring the risk and the hazard, identification of control measures, and so on. The last part of the advice is asking you to specify how you mitigate against the risks before, during, and after the task is completed. Think about a specific task you perform in your lab. What risks are associated with this task, and how do you mitigate those risks before, during, and after you finished this task? What control measures are in place? Now let's talk about the 3 SOPs that need to be met by this piece of mandatory evidence. The first standard is, demonstrate awareness of relevant health and safety legislation and comply with all local operational procedures and policies. First standard is asking you to demonstrate awareness of relevant health and safety legislations and comply with local procedures and policies. First, find out what are the relevant health and safety legislations. Consider COSHH and handling hazardous substances, RIDDOR and reporting injuries and diseases, health and safety at work regulations and injury prevention, or good laboratory practice regulations. Then consider procedures and policies like risk management, provide safety information, training, safety policy, adequate facilities, availability of PPE. How do you comply with local policies and procedures during your practice? The second standard is, work safely, including being able to select appropriate hazard control and risk management, reduction or elimination techniques in a safe manner and in accordance with health and safety legislation. To meet the second standard, you need to demonstrate that you work safely, you are able to use appropriate hazard controls and risk management techniques safely and in accordance with health and safety legislations. How do you ensure you work safely? What risk management techniques do you have in your workplace and how do you use them? Consider elimination, substitution, reduction or risks and hazards, PPE, ventilation, hazard isolation, procedure change, minimize risk and so on. How do you assess risks and hazards? Consider hazard identification, establishing who might be at risk, how they might be at risk, evaluate risks, decide on appropriate controls, record findings, monitor the effectiveness of controls, review assessments, and update them if needed. The third standard is, select appropriate personal protective equipment and use it correctly. This standard is straightforward. You need to be able to select appropriate PPE and use it correctly. What PPE is available to you? Consider gloves, goggles, lab coat, aprons, masks, respirators, and so on. When and how would you use each PPE mentioned? Consider selecting appropriate protection, compatibility, fit, condition, removal, storage, training and so on. Those are the standards you have to keep in mind when writing your mandatory evidence. They should all be demonstrated in your mandatory evidence. So now that we have finished with the mandatory evidence, let's have a look at the choice evidence 2 and 3, which are candidates' choice evidence and Q&A set by the trainer. They both together have to meet 12 HCPC standards. And if you download the module descriptors for the registration portfolio from the IBMS website, you will find some example evidence suggested by the IBMS, which is very handy. And these are the HCPC standards that have to be met by those two pieces of evidence. The first standard is, identify anxiety and stress in themselves and recognize the potential impact on their practice. To meet this standard, you need to be able to identify when you are acting under stress and anxiety. How does stress and anxiety present in you? What are the signs your colleagues can observe when you are feeling stressed and anxious? Consider physical signs like tiredness, tension, sleep disturbance, headaches, or rapid breathing, behavioral signs like increased sickness, aggression, crying, withdrawal, decreased productivity, emotional or cognitive signs like worry, feeling overwhelmed, indecisiveness, poor concentration, irritability, and others. What impacts could they have on your practice? Consider decision-making, concentration, reduced productivity, social withdrawal, burnout, memory problems. The second standard is, understand the importance of their own mental and physical health and well-being strategies in maintaining fitness to practice. To meet this standard, you need to know how to maintain fitness to practice in consideration to your own mental and physical health and well-being. Why is it important to look after your physical and mental health? The importance of your health and the effects on the safety of your practice, your capability, performance, resilience and effectiveness, your cognitive functions, ability to maintain your professional standards, or handling pressure. The third standard is, understand how to take appropriate action if their health may affect their ability to practice safely and effectively, including seeking help and support when necessary. To meet this standard, you need to know how to seek help and support or take appropriate actions if your health affects your ability to practice. Do you know what help and support is available to you? Think counseling, therapy, well-being sessions, occupational health, CBT or NHS practitioner health service. What actions can you take to maintain your well-being? Why are they important? Consider introducing routine, self-assessment, self-care, time management, support seeking, communication with management, choosing coping strategies, adjusting your practice. The fourth standard is, develop and adopt clear strategies for physical and mental self-care and self-awareness, to maintain a high standard of professional effectiveness and a safe working environment. To meet this standard, you need to have your own strategies for self-care and self-awareness to maintain professional effectiveness and safe working environment. Think about your hobbies, exercise, nutrition, reading, mindfulness, social activities, breathing exercises, and so on. These will be very personal to you. How do they maintain your physical and mental well-being? The fifth standard is, understand the biological hazards groups and associated containment levels. To meet this standard, you need to know about different biological hazard groups and containment levels. Consider hazard group 1 to 4. Also consider examples of infective agents in each group, diseases that can be caused by agents, risk level to humans and community, treatment availability, containment level, safety practices like equipment or facility used. Would any of the samples you received during your practice have those biological hazards? If so, how do you minimize exposure to them? What levels of containment are available to you in your workplace? Try to bring in some examples from your practice. The sixth standard is, understand the need to maintain the safety of themselves and others, including service users, carers, and colleagues. To meet this standard, you need to understand the need to maintain safety in your practice. Why is maintaining safety important? Consider the key aspect of safety like duty of care, obligations, ethical requirement, compliance, policies in place, risk management, harm prevention, protection. What could happen if the safety was not maintained? Consider harm or trauma, damage to environment, disease spread, mortality, impact on service, disciplinary action, loss of employment or registration, consequences. Try to include examples from your practice how you personally maintain safety. The seventh standard is, establish safe environments for practice, which appropriately manages risk. This standard links nicely to the previous standard about maintaining safety we have just discussed. For this standard, you need to be able to establish safe working environment. How do you do that? What do you do to keep your others safe and create safe working environment? Consider risk assessment and management, maintaining physical, environmental and emotional safety, effective training and collaboration, control measures, routine inspections, incident reporting, using clear policies and safe procedures, continuous improvement, maintaining professional standards, transparency, compliance, and so on. The eighth standard is, understand the application of principles of good laboratory practice. To meet this standard, you need to understand how to apply the principles of good laboratory practice. What are the principles of good laboratory practice? Consider the management, qualified staff, quality assurance program, facilities, equipment used, testing procedures, SOPs, monitoring performance, reporting, and so on. How are the principles applied in practice? Consider planning, writing protocols, relevant documentation, standardization, SOPs, equipment and facility management, verification and validation, data integrity, delivering training, quality assurance via IQC and EQA. How do you apply those in your practice? The ninth standard is, understand the role of their profession in health promotion, health education, and preventing ill health. For this standard, you have to understand your role as a healthcare professional in health promotion, health education, ill health prevention. What do you do to promote health, educate others about health, and prevent ill health? Do you set an example for others to follow? Consider promoting healthy diet, exercise, self-care, setting an example, active communication and education about the importance of health and ill health, offering prevention strategies, collaboration with others to promote health, highlighting health benefits, healthy behaviors, evidence-based prevention, targeting inequalities, and so on. How do you promote and educate others? The 10th standard is, understand how social, economic, and environmental factors, wider determinants of health, can influence a person's health and well-being. To meet this standard, you need to know which social, economic, and environmental factors can influence person's health and well-being. Consider social factors like education, community, relationships, or family dynamics. Economic factors like income, employment, or financial security. Environmental factors like air quality, pollution, noise, or green spaces, access to healthy food, water, or air. Who could those impact person's health and well-being? The 11th standard is, empower and enable individuals, including service users and colleagues, to play a part in managing their own health. To meet this standard, you need to be able to empower others to take part in managing their own health. What do you do to achieve this? Consider sharing reliable information, help tools, facilitation of education about health, encouraging certain behaviors, promoting mental well-being, fostering confidence, involving others, personalized planning, coaching, promoting self-care and self-management, promoting prevention, and so on. How do you equip people with knowledge and confidence to take part in their own health? Partners in their health journey rather than passive recipient of care. The 12th standard is, engage in occupational health, including being aware of immunization requirements. To meet this standard, you need to engage in occupational health. As part of the employment process to the NHS Trust, every new employee has to undergo health check and immunization status check. Have you had yours? What is your immunization status and requirement? Consider engagement like proactive approach, disease prevention, vaccination, risk assessment, employment process, and so on. Also consider immunization requirements such as MMR, hepatitis B, seasonal influenza, tetanus, diphtheria, polio, varicella, and others. Always have those standards in your mind when you are selecting a piece of evidence and then when you are writing it. Remember, all those standards need to be demonstrated in 2 pieces of evidence you choose. One more thing you have to include when choosing and writing your evidence. And that is the evidence justification. For the mandatory piece of evidence, the IBMS has provided a very good justification why they would want you to do that piece of evidence. I would strongly advise you to read their justifications, as this can form the basis for how you be justifying your choice of evidence. You should also include what standards you have met by your evidence. Think about what type of evidence you have chosen, then think why you have chosen that particular evidence, and think which standards you are meeting with that evidence as well. These are some suggestions from the IBMS that could be used as the choice evidence in this section. They are pretty good and can meet several standards, which is what you need. And these are types of evidence ideas I would also suggest. Again, they can meet several standards as well, which is the goal. Some more evidence ideas you could consider. Some more evidence ideas you could consider. I would also like to share with you some helpful tips that can make your portfolio look really good. Try to present the information in various formats such as tables, pictures, photographs, diagrams, flowcharts, graphs, or even videos, if you can. This nicely breaks down a lot of text that is usually present in specialist portfolios. Try to make it a little bit more interesting to the reader, which will be your training officer and eventually the verifier. Try to put yourself in their shoes. How would you like to read hundreds of pages of plain text? There is a saying I really like, and it goes like this: a picture is worth 1,000 words. I will make a video where I will share with you my evidence I used for my portfolio back in the day. Hopefully that will help as well. Also try to use various types of evidence, not just one type, like case studies, for each subsection. You could use experiments, case studies, annotated results, annotated photographs of you performing tasks, evidence of troubleshooting, annotated EQA results, nonconformances, validation and verification evidence, comparisons of different approaches and their pros and cons, control material production, certificates of course attendance with reflective statements, annotated images or charts, and so on. Try to bring in your personality. Think about the ways you like to learn best. If you like experimenting, perform experiment. If you like troubleshooting, perform troubleshooting. Choose something that demonstrates your understanding, knowledge, skills, and how you apply this in your practice. And one more thing, keep the competence requirements in mind when you selecting your evidence. Good evidence will tick off several requirements. And this brings me to the end of today's video. Hopefully you now have a better understanding about the standards that are within this section and how to meet those standards with relevant evidence. And my final take-home message? Keep those standards in mind when selecting and approaching your evidence. Bye for now.